Hello, it's Bronwyn Logan here again from Reiki Women Podcasts, and I'm also here with my wonderful colleagues and fellow podcastees, Michaela Daystar and Carrie Varela. So welcome, friends. Great. So today, what we thought we'd chat about is gratitude. So one of the Reiki precepts. So we thought we'd bring it up and we're just going to have a chat about gratitude and possibly bring it into some other realms than what we might normally think of, and hopefully inspire you guys to think about gratitude as well. So look, just to begin with, I've got a question. And Michaela, I'm going to pick on you first, right? But Carrie, feel free to just bully your way in there. Yep. So not that you would ever do that. So what is it that helps you feel a sense of belonging within a Reiki community?
Yeah. I mean, when we're thinking about gratitude and what are the aspects of our Reiki practice that really center on gratitude, the presence of community was definitely one of the ones that felt really true. And I've been a member of a variety of Reiki communities, beginning with the community cultivated by my first teacher, and some that I've cultivated myself, others that have been kind of spontaneously have arisen from colleagueship and practice. And I would say that in all of those, there were different things that helps me feel like I belonged, but there were some things that were common. And I would say that, I mean, it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, that certainly one of those things was a shared dedication to the practice of Reiki. And specifically, I think for the places that I've felt the most at home and the most like I could really express myself and I could really dive into the things that were interesting to me, it wasn't so much around everybody kind of practicing in the same way or thinking in the same way, but everyone being truly dedicated to the practice. And that hasn't been true in all of the spaces that I've been in. There's been spaces where Reiki is, part of kind of a variety of things that people do. And, maybe not the most important one, like not perhaps their central focus, or maybe they did Reiki and perhaps just didn't connect with it particularly well. And so it's like, yeah, it's something that they do, but it's not really something that is really motivating that sense of connection. And so that's been true in the places where I've most belonged, because I feel like I can just really just geek out on it, right? Like just be as big of a Reiki nerd as I want to be right, in those spaces. And from that, there's this just energy that gets generated and learning that gets generated that allows for some really transformative things to happen. Yeah, I think I'll start with that shared passion and commitment to the practice.
Yeah, just about community. I know that I think of, if I think about the different changes in my life and how, community has been always incredibly important. And I was just thinking about like having a new family, when you have a child, and that thing of, that's when I really noticed how much I needed community. I think up until that point, I didn't really appreciate it as much. And I took family as being, my extended family, of which I don't have a great deal, but I took that as being, I guess, community, and of course friends. But every time that there's been a change in my life at least, then often that community's changed, so that it's hard to find this consistent thing. And I can see, for example, I really understood when I had a child, people's attraction to the church, for example, for community. And then when I had a young family, then starting at the same time as I was pregnant, I was just starting the Reiki business with my husband. And so we were building a community within that at the same time, which became the Reiki community around that became the community, you know, and it was beautiful bringing up a child within that community. And, you know, well, you know, we've done things like that. We had lots of practice groups, and, you know, we had lots of consistent retreats that we would do. And, you know, bringing your child into that, and everybody, I love that everyone is so beautiful towards children, you know, that is something in humanity, the way that we are so wonderful with children. And it's sort of this natural thing to love and care for kids. And that's especially in community, you know, where you know you can let your kid run around, and everyone is going to look after that child, and that child knows that sense of safety and peace and love, and that's such a beautiful thing. And yeah, for me, that's what the Reiki community has. I mean, there's been lots of things, but that certainly gave that to me for my family, for my child. Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, what helps me feel a sense of belonging within the Reiki community, it's kind of like a little bit of a double edge for me, because I think in some senses I found really beautiful, deep connection with other people who practice Reiki. And there's something that comes from that connection of just knowing the process of Reiki, the experience of Reiki, maybe some of the transformative experiences that we shared, that it lended towards a deeper friendship than really I feel like I can have with maybe somebody who doesn't practice Reiki, or you know, doesn't feel that same pull or attraction to an invisible energy. So, you know, and, you know, of course, Reiki has been my friend throughout all of my, really since the moment I found it. But yeah, I think it's just been really wonderful at one point to, like, you know, really connect with like-minded individuals. And I also would say that I think part and parcel of my struggle as a Reiki practitioner is that it has been very lonely and isolating at times, just in the sense that I'm working for myself. And so it's not like I can go to, you know, a workplace and, you know, have some work colleagues or whatever, or go to happy hour after work. Like, the work I do is so interpersonal. And then I think also sometimes it's hard to blur the line with the relationships that I have with my clients and sometimes my students, because I do feel like a deep connection to them, or some of them might be my friends, and then, you know, wanted to do Reiki too, or did a training with me as well. And then, so then there was just this is kind of like sticky boundary about, are you my friend, are you my client, or like certain situations where I'd have to like take off a hat and put on another one. So kind of navigating that has always been a little bit of a difficulty for me. And ultimately what I found is that I didn't feel a big sense of belonging or connection to a bigger Reiki community. And so it inspired me to create my own. And and some of the things that I didn't feel very represented is that within the Reiki community is just like, well, I think I could precursor it that we, you know, we all made really a pact here to like not necessarily talk about lineage as like, you know, the thing that we just sit here and talk about for hours on end. And we could maybe go into that, and it'd be a little bit of a popularity contest, right? Of like, oh, this lineage or that lineage. And actually that's a lot of conversation that it tends to happen when you get Reiki people together. It's like, oh, let's talk about this lineage or that lineage, and preferences here or there. And that to me is what sometimes happens. And I think that's unfortunate. But nevertheless, you know, like the way I connect to Reiki is very much through nature. It's through meditation, of course, but I've kind of lost the taste for connecting to Reiki as like angelic guidance. And so I feel like that's very, very much represented in mainstream Reiki communities. And there's a different way of being with Reiki. And I felt like ultimately, like I was kind of striving to find more sense of belonging within Reiki, different Reiki communities. And luckily, I think I have found that. And I think we're creating a great community too. here with our podcast, Reiki Women. But ultimately, I found that my desire for a deeper and different type of community, I think that there's lots of different communities and there can be more space for communities within Reiki. But that I didn't see myself really represented in a lot of the Reiki communities. And so it was kind of a painful process ultimately, also because it felt very lonely. But what spurred inside of me is that if I don't see myself represented in a Reiki community, then I need to make something that represents how I connect to Reiki, because there's probably a lot of other people who feel as disenfranchised as I do. And so those are one of the things that really inspired me to create my practice and rebrand my practice really ultimately as the Reiki Healing Society.
So Carrie, there's a couple of things in there. There was a lot of richness in what you just shared, but a couple of things that really jumped out. First, really acknowledging that sense of loneliness and isolation that can happen when we're working, first of all, as a solopreneur, and then possibly, coming into a practice that there either isn't an existing community or the existing community isn't really values aligned, as you were speaking. That values alignment is so important for that sense of belonging. And when we don't have it and we're trying to participate in community, like with all of our authenticity, and so is everybody else, but there's just not that alignment about what, really motivates us, it can be really painful and isolating. So I just want to really acknowledge that. And the other piece that came to my mind was the juxtaposition between like belonging and then like loss of belonging and the grief that can come with that. And the way in which just for today, I am grateful can be such an important thing to work with in those instances. So, there's been times when I've spent years inside of a particular community, one, a Reiki community, and then another spiritual community I've been a part of. And for just various circumstances, not like horrible things happening, but just misalignments or things shifting or, for whatever reason, choosing to leave those communities. And even when that's the right thing, like there's this grief, right? There's this loss that happens when we've committed ourselves to a group of people that we love, and then it's time to leave. And for me in those instances, so much loneliness and so many like old stories about not belonging and not being, being a part of things really just rushed back in. And working with the precept of just for today, I'm grateful has been a really important medicine for me in that. And just really sinking back into, gratitude, which is so much about the present moment, right? It's so much about acceptance of what is so right now, not what used to be, not what might be in the future, but what is so right now is, what just for today, I'm grateful means for me. And as somebody who suffers from depression and who's like gone through a lot of loss lately, like being able to just rest back in to like, I am grateful for what is so right now, right? It's such a powerful redirection of my focus from the things that I've lost, from the things that I wish were true that are not true, and just into that resting place of like, what is true right now, even with all of the hard parts, like is what I'm grateful for. And that just, I don't know, I just really felt that when you were talking about that sense of loneliness or those sense of misalignments with values, like those things are painful, especially when we've invested, or especially when we're really lacking a community. And then there's just this miss that happens. So yeah, those things are really real and powerful. Yeah.
To me, it's very much, it's interesting that you both speak like that. When you first started speaking, Michaela, my first thoughts were about exactly what you were just talking about the creating and the loss of community. And I guess they're like the double side of the coin, and that's why it is about acceptance and these things that we expect. I was speaking earlier about having a child. I know when I had a child, it was like, oh, I should, I had this expectation I should be in some sort of community, I should be in, but we'd moved to a new country, more or less, it was my country, but I hadn't lived in this area. And, so everything was new. And it's like, well, how do you create community? And then, we created community. We sort of did what Carrie was talking about, creating your own community. And possibly, we all feel like that, but we all take part in those communities in different ways, and we all have different roles within those communities. And I think for me, I very much within that community took the role of mother and carer. And then when my child sort of got to a certain point and I got divorced, then I lost a lot of that. So that when you were initially talking about that sense of loss, and then it's like, so then I lost that. And then it's like, okay, so where do I sit then with that? And, I think it takes a long time communities don't just happen. So that whole thing of spending time thinking about where you're at, and as, sitting in that moment, and definitely the precepts being a part of all of that. And I always say that the precepts can answer any questions that you have, those deeper questions, that the answers are there. And but it doesn't mean that things like our expectations or our desires are how would you say that, are fulfilled. Yeah. And we all go through those moments of the feeling of having and have not, I guess. Yeah.
And it's such a risk, it's such a risk to love, to connect, to build something, to create something. It's always a risk. And, as a person who's, very introverted and like has a kind of personal emotional history around like loss and abandonment, like it's so easy to just not take that risk. It's so easy to say, I am better off by myself. Like I am better off hunkering down and doing this myself and trying to fill my needs by myself, or keeping a real small, tight group of people, maybe one person. And it's like, while I know I'll always need more alone time and that's okay, like that unwillingness to risk connection is not healthy. Like that's not Reiki. That's not living true to my way and my being. And so there's this kind of continuous dance that I do with myself around like convincing myself to take that risk. And it's always worth it, right? Even when it's painful, and even when things don't work out over, maybe as long of a period of time as I would like. I mean, that old adage that it's better to have loved than lost than never to have loved at all. Like I've come to believe that. I used to be like, whatever, but I actually do believe that. And, and again, as you say, the precepts give us all the answers. Like it gives us the pathway through the risk and the scariness of taking that risk. And it gives us the guidance through the grief when it ends.
Yeah, just there was also attached to some of the things that we were going to talk about today that I think where this comes in, and that's fear. Yeah. And that's exactly what you're talking about, that fear of being frozen and unable to move into that what for some reason appears to be a scary space.
Absolutely. They're so interconnected, right?
Yeah, I think I feel very fortunate to have had such enriching communities in my life, especially not just through Reiki, but also through yoga. And like one of my yoga teachers, Ian Finn, he is like the maestro at community. I mean, I've just really never met anybody who has a better gift for like community and cultivating community. And so a lot of my closest friends, are people I've met on my path, like whether it be through a Reiki training or a yoga teacher training. Those people I feel like just this really deep sense of connection to, and friendship. And so that like, it's not necessarily something we go and get coffee once a week or anything like that. But I think through like social media and different channels, I do really feel connected to, all the good and bad things that are happening in their life. And I value that so much. And I think a sense of belonging, sometimes I think it's important to remember that we don't necessarily need shared values or shared point of view in order to have community. And the community that I want to create more of is one where we just have a greater sense of like an okayness with diversity, and or maybe more safe space for diversity. Knowing that, some people who might not feel very comfortable in a community space, we have to intentionally draw them out and into conversation, because those are probably the people that need that connection even more than I do. And I think some other markers of community that are really important to me is like a willingness to, not always be led by one individual, but like letting other people take the lead and like highlighting others in the community who are doing wonderful things. And so I think sometimes that's not really laid out as some of the parameters for being in community, but I think that they're so important. And I've seen the other way around, where especially in yoga spaces, sometimes there's this idea of like a cult of personality, where one person is just so big and such a great light that everybody attracts to them and everyone wants to be connected to them, and that's all that community is about. And we lose the disconnect from each other, and it feels more like a popularity contest. So,
shared leadership,
cool.
is what you're talking about. And that's a value, right? Like valuing shared leadership and there being space for many voices. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love about us, by the way, may I just say that? I'll give a little thank you gratitude here. And we're all totally unique, different women. And, I don't know you that well, and I don't think, you don't know me that well. And I think that we just, going into this project is a bit of a leap. And I am thoroughly enjoying just listening to you. Like Michaela saying she was an introvert. I was like, oh, are you really? Because I didn't realize that. And 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 I love that Carrie always sits back and thinks, and she's the sort of and then she comes forward and says her piece so beautifully, and it is wonderful. I really appreciate the different things that you bring to every discussion. And my thoughts are, I enjoy learning from you, and because I know you both have really unique ways of being you and the way that you see the world. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, similarly, I love that we just kind of naturally took on a shared leadership model without even really having to talk about it too much.
Yeah.
And Carrie, some of the things that you were saying about the people who've, come into your life and the way that they've been in your life and community reminded me of some of the other questions that we had been working with around gratitude, in particular, the forms of support that we've received inside of community that have been the most meaningful. And then similarly, what forms of support might we, hope for, want for, ask for moving forward? So I'm wondering if either of you have any thoughts on that, of, just what forms of support have been the most meaningful inside of community?
Well, I just going back one topic, I am also just so grateful for each of you. We could all just have a little great gratitude hour. And what I think was so cool when I think we sparked this conversation, Bronwyn and I were doing Reiki training together. And I may have said something a little bit about the same things that I've been saying in community. And she just really took those comments and was like, well, let's change things, and let's make a different forum for community, because I think there's so much that so many people want to tell their stories of what brought them to Reiki and why it's been so meaningful for them, and meaningful for them enough to like change their career path, or embark on a really deep spiritual journey with an invisible energy, again, but we have this really profound, deep interconnection to it. And anyway, so I'm just super grateful for each of you and all of the contribution that we share. And I think our conversations are really hopefully like nurturing not only each other, but this larger audience that I know are tuning in. And so very grateful for you, our audience who are tuning in, and would love to hear your voices more on our podcast as well.
Yeah.
But when I think about the things that have been most supportive and meaningful to me is, and I think it might relate back to a wound for me, but there is something about a teacher or somebody, that you place in a place of authority who sees you and like just has that capacity to see you, acknowledge you, notice you in the room, and can draw out like some of the best things that you had to contribute. And so that to me is very meaningful. It's meaningful for me when I've been in the place of being a student and people have pointed that out, or like I felt seen in a community space. And then also when I've had the opportunity to teach, it's so important for me to try to connect to everybody in the room in a way that they feel seen and heard. And that's just, to me, like, I think there's nothing worse than just being in a room around a bunch of people and feeling even then alone because you're just kind of a wallflower, or maybe don't feel comfortable being seen. And so that's one thing. It's kind of a obscure thing, but something that I always really tried to cultivate. And I think in terms of a contribution of a practice is what I would long to see a little bit more of, is like less hierarchy within community spaces, especially within Reiki spaces, because I feel like sometimes we put ourselves on a pedestal. Oh, I'm the Reiki master, or I'm the Reiki teacher. And so like and maybe we don't mean to do it, or it's subconscious, but we are playing an ego game. With each other. And what I really long for in community space is just coming together as equals. And yes, we might be separated by different experiences or depth of experiences or length of time studying something, but that like we can come together and like just be on the same level as and share a humanness with each other. So that's something that really is like the drive for me of what I want to create within community.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, so what has been supportive? I mean, I guess what I feel like saying is the precepts, which is a little bit corny, that's all.
Why we're here, right?
Because it is that going inside the self, and looking for that inner strength. And I know we're talking about community, but possibly I'm not great at community. I have no idea. What I'm thinking is that for myself, it's very much about having to go inside to find the strength to give me the support to be there, to face the world, and so we keep saying it, but I'm forever grateful for those precepts, just for the simplicity of that and the knowledge that everything is okay. I guess the support of knowing that there is more to this world than the things that possibly I've been told by society, that's been really supportive for me. Actually experiencing Reiki in a myriad of ways. I mean, we could say through treatments, every time I do a treatment, that sense of being in that space with someone else, that sharing of that, is just mind-blowing, I find. And I think that will be forever mind-blowing. And it's, or when I'm practicing meditation, that sense of total interconnectedness that I forget in my life, and then bringing that back and bringing that back and bringing that back. So those are the things for me that I think really are the support. And, I feel grateful for any connections that I can make in this world with people around me, and that I can foster and build upon. And I loved what you said, Carrie, no matter who we are, that thing of having the depth. We all have different experiences, but we all are humans in this together. And
I think that's a more feminine approach towards just the community in general. I think sometimes.
Yeah. I just got an email. I have to say, I got an email the other day that someone who I didn't know, but someone who picked me out as a Reiki person sent some sort of email saying that our leader, and it had some guy's name behind it, wants us to do blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, I swore. And which I'm not going to do here in case I was, should I? I don't know, I won't. And I was like, our leader? That's not my leader. What the hell? Like, it's crazy, women putting ourselves once again in that position of like needing a male leader. I don't need that. Yeah. And I'm quite happy to hold hands, but I don't need that leader. Yeah.
I love that. Just for the record, I'm perfectly fine with swearing on this podcast.
But, good.
You might need to keep it family friendly. I don't know.
I'm sure the babies aren't listening. So, Michaela, tell us about what's been supportive in your life for you, especially as a Reiki practitioner and a woman.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many directions that I could go with that. What came up when I was listening to the two of you is the opportunities to be invited in. And that came really strongly, I think, as I was listening to you. And I know, that one of the ways in which women get put into those boxes that we were talking about before and kind of constrained is in the belief that we can't take initiative to, put ourselves forward as an expert or as somebody who can accomplish something, or, as one who should, be listened to. And so as a result, one of the most beautiful experiences can be when we're invited. And so, this podcast is a really beautiful example. The two of you invited me to do this with you. And as much as I had already wanted to collaborate with you on something, Bronwyn, and Carrie and I had already been having conversations about collaboration, like that explicit invitation was just like immediate, yes, this is going to happen. And so when that has happened in community spaces, that is a form of support that I've always really appreciated.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, that's a beautiful way to end today, I think, actually. Thank you so much to the two of you for sharing your deep little thoughts on all of that, and being vulnerable, talking about loss and gain, and yes, and thank you for the support that you offer each other and me. All the people out there, I hope you're feeling supported, and you're welcome to join us in any of these conversations. Let us know if you would like to also share some of your thoughts, and we can do little interviews with you on some snapshots. So thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again at our next podcast.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. Mwah.